Greetings, my fellow freedom lovers, sovereign thinkers. Thank you for tuning in to LL3 Podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful land of enchantment. And today's date is Thursday, April 16th, 2020. Yeah, so it's nice out here in the heart of New Mexico. Birds are chirping, so it's good positive atmosphere. Yeah, I had a little rain and snow in this area, which is, I haven't seen it in a long time. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, so it's interesting now what's been happening with the COVID-19. They're saying the curve has been deflating, which is all well and good. And plus you have many folks out there in forms of government, whether it's federal, state, or local, committing crimes for going to church. But there's packed in a lot of other places. Can we say double speak? Doesn't matter what your creed is, but some folks call it Marxist, Communist, Soviet, Communism 101, tyranny as a whole. And of course, if people are still concerned, there's people protesting out there, Michigan, a few other places, Ohio, and even areas in England and Germany open up, end the lockdown. It's all well and good, but one thing I have to agree with some folks, just open up damn businesses and have the people back you up. Because the bottom line is this, folks. There's more of us than them. We're going to have a bunch of governmental delegates trying to tell us how to live and think. That's the term for liberty. Freedom plus morality equals liberty. Always got to be vigilant on our health? Absolutely. And there's fantastic remedies out there. Minerals, zinc. So I think in Florida they had the form of a Freedom Healthcare Act, and I know Donald Trump signed the law about people should try other remedies to end certain illnesses or treat it, which I have to commend him for that. So it looks like some folks are complaining, even down in my great state of Florida. Some of the churches people are congregating. Oh, we gotta get them for murder if these people die. Wow, it shows you where you stand. Bellying up, bending over, licking your boots of tyrants. Something to think about. Fear is a great weapon, my friends. John Adams warned us about it. Part of the political game. Have us belly up. And many of the people out there should learn the lessons of 9/11. It became the road to tyranny. So why is that? Everyone bellied up. They bought a lot of them, not all, but a great amount of people, or then when they publicized, they attacked us because of our freedoms. Yeah. Folks that witnessed it, which, natural reactions, people were primitive that day. And I could say myself as well. I could admit that. But I took time to do a little homework before I jumped to conclusions. I told everyone you got to pay attention. So, if you're going to let history repeat itself, my friends, whether you're in the United States, Canada, Mexico, Germany, England, Australia, South Africa, doesn't matter. Because one thing we know for sure, we all got awesome gifts that can enhance humanity. So what's your move? And I was watching this video from Caitlin Bennett, young lady. She one who carried AR-15 in graduation, which I think is awesome. And she talked about the Fox News exclusive about the whole Wuhan coronavirus, the bioweapon and all that. I'm like, exclusive? I had to laugh. I'm sorry. But it was nice that she put it out there. I'm not going to condemn her for it, but I just bust out laughing. Exclusive. Please. A lot of us been spreading sharing that information long before Fox News. But I will commend them for putting it out there. Because many of us are convinced it was a bioweapon. Yes, China, communist China, I'll say that, communist China are responsible for letting it leak, whether it's accidental or intent. But based on credibility, we have to question it. However, others were involved as well. I was reading the case that happened in, of course, I talk about Francis Boyle, Professor Francis Boyle, talking about University of North Carolina, and there was one case, a professor from Harvard and 2 Chinese nationalists were indicted. One is fugitive, and the other one was carrying viral-related material. Pretty coincidental, and it's interesting because it was they got the grant from Harvard. The professor for Harvard got that grant from National Institute of Health and the Department of Defense. Interesting, right? It's been going on for a very long time with China and the United States sharing information, all that, since the Nixon administration. Officially. So, hey, people got to know the truth about these things. Observe responsibly. So, but bottom line is this, my friends. Is that an invasion or insurrection? Well, one thing I know for sure, like I've been telling people for a long time, be stay vigilant on your health. There's many people with these viruses were preconditioned. I know I repeat myself from past episodes, but I digress. So, one thing is happening right now is states' rights are back on the table. Because I can say this too, because I know even Florida Governor DeSantis were saying that church services are essential. And people that know my show for a very long time, I can be critical of him. And there's times I will commend him. So I thank Governor DeSantis for that. Now, let's end the lockdown. If we have to do things by a smooth transition, so be it. Alright, well, without further ado, I know I talked for a nice little rant there. Let's let it out. Well, we're going to start here pertaining to the COVID-19 lockdown. A couple of articles on here. That's going to be pretty cool, pretty brief. This one came out yesterday, believe it or not, by the dailymail.com, which is like a pro-libertarian site. But they got some good content. This one's by Joe Jarvis. It's entitled, Suddenly States' Rights Are Back on the Table. As it reads here, it must be confusing to be progressive these days. They criticize Trump's lack of dictatorial control over the country to stop the coronavirus. He left the lockdowns to the state governments. But then Trump suggests that the feds will make the call on when to reopen the economy, aka give people their rights back. Trump said when somebody is the president of the United States, the authority is total. The president of the United States calls the shots. And just like that, the 10th Amendment was reborn. Suddenly, the radical left loves the Constitution. Specifically, part of the Bill of Rights says, powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution or prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or the people. Trump has done more states' rights than any other president in modern history. I can't argue with that. Like I said, I'm critical of him at times. Okay, sometimes we may not have the best rhetoric. However, I have to agree with Mr. Jarvis on this one. Not because he's trying to, because he is universally hated by the left. And the lefties were the ones lagging behind on understanding why state governments are more important check on federal power. But Trump has strengthened the argument for state power on the right as well. I mean, we're looking at a $4 trillion deficit in the federal budget this year alone. It took Obama 4 years to rack up that kind of debt. Ignore the Trump fanatics. Grounded people understand that this massive spending comes with a real price tag. It means the dollar and the federal government will lose its power as the currency is devalued. The feds have long held money over states as bribes to do their bidding where the control was not strictly legal. For instance, highway funds in exchange for each state raising the drinking age by 21, which is null and void. I've been saying that for a very long time, alright? When that leverage is gone, and when the feds can only pay their enforcers with worthless paper, it is logical to think the states will pick up the pieces, reject federal authority, and go on their ways. The whole situation was brewing under the surface before, but the coronavirus is a trigger that could shift it into overdrive. And now, states look like they aren't going to wait for a dollar to collapse to make their moves. For instance, the tiniest state, Rhode Island, has gone full Gestapo and is searching for New Yorkers who enter the state without quarantining. My parents live in Massachusetts, and my dad planned to sail his new boat down to Rhode Island to park it there. But that won't be happening during this pandemic. Rhode Island is closed to outsiders. Other states like California, Oregon, Washington are forming coalitions to decide when to reopen the economies and how to further deal with coronavirus in the region, like the United States was meant to be. These states are participating in these pacts voluntarily. That means they could also withdraw from them, another check on centralized control. Some East Coast states will also be creating their own coalition. And here is an important aspect of the regional government to consider, that this is not a new phenomenon, or something that hasn't been since the 1781 Articles of Confederation. It's how it shows that there was never a united state, united USA. The fault lines of politics have fallen along 11 main regions. For example, Yankeedom is dominated by Massachusetts but extends to most of New England, and it has its roots in Puritanism. Their style of centralized government and the value of education. Immigrants from Yankeedom left their mark on the left coast, a natural policy ally of New England. Contrast that the Deep South, born of aristocracy, who believe in a deeply hierarchical structure of society, or Appalachia, who value individual freedom and have shifted their alliances with other regions based on who will get the feds off their back. Woodward argues the nation have been struggling with one another for advantage and influence since they were founded. And from 1790, the biggest prize has been control over federal government institutions, Congress, White House, courts, and the military. As the central government has grown in size, scope, and power, so have the nation's efforts to capture and reshape it, and the rest of the continent in their image. Since 1877, the driving force between American politicians hasn't primarily have been a class struggle or tension between agrarian and commercial interests, or even between competing partisan ideologies, although each has play a role. Ultimately, the determinative political struggle has been a clash between shifting coalitions of ethno-regional nations, or invariable, headed by the Deep South, or other by Yankeedom. These fault lines aren't going away, but they don't have to become violent either. In fact, the American nations were to go their separate ways, life would be much improved for many, not just during a pandemic, when people have very different ideas about the scope of government power. but also during the looming economic crisis when currencies, local supply chains, and regional commerce will have to be reinvented. And no one would have to waste time worrying about who occupied the White House. Absolutely. And it's true because even if you study the political structure, alright, for a very long time, you got folks out there are rallying for their president, for a person, their candidate to be president. They believe in the magic wand theory, magic lamp. Bing! Everything's going to be so hunky-dory and have utopia. Please. I have to disagree. Because one thing I learned, too, I traveled the country a lot, and I can say this. Each region and state lives are different. You can't have people from New York City tell others in South Florida what to do, or vice versa. Just an example. Or how going to Utah and people say this is how we do it in California. Nah. If it's non-liberating ideas, it's invalid. It's garbage. But one of the areas we got to look at, this is why the 10th Amendment has been important. And many folks say about the so-called, I call it the so-called Civil War, and some people don't like that, but, I don't really care. When they say, oh, we fought over slavery, no, when the 13 states seceded, that was the reason. One of the main reasons was states' rights. And you talk to a person who's not crazy about slavery anyway. I love what the abolitionist movement done. The Quakers were badasses. Abolitionist folks were amazing. They were the true activists. So how come the states are trying to, the central people support centralization? Why? Because they're being indoctrinated, dumbed down, brainwashed, etc. But this is a good opportunity for these United States, sovereign states, not as a federal corporation. All you gotta do is look at Title 28 U.S. Code Section 3002 in its entirety, and you can understand where it comes from. I did a show on that as well. But it's an exciting time, folks, because here's the thing: the Federal Reserve is illegal. Gold and silver should be gold and silver coins is considered legit, and even on the state level, Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution, the states can do that. So I say, let it ride. When there's chaos, there's opportunity. Let the states support their true sovereignty, and we can honor the U.S. Constitution more thoroughly. There's going to be differences? Oh yeah, there's always going to be disagreements. It's part of human nature, my friends. But you know what? I like this a lot more. I like this dearly. So we're going to do one more here. That's what, I'm just going to do these short little bumps here and there. So to see what mood I'm in. But this one came from the Mises Institute. And this was entitled Decentralization and Privatization Haven't Gone Far Enough in Coronavirus Testing. This is by James Kettler. And it says here, expertise is distributed across thousands of different minds in the medical community. Sorry about that. One moment. The only way to counteract the spread of an infectious illness such as the coronavirus is to take on all hands on deck approach, allowing innovators in the field to advance new solutions as unique challenges emerge. But instead, under the aegis of the federal government nationwide, medical decisions are made by a centralized slate of technocrats. Everything hinges on their decisions, and because many mistakes they made during the month of February, called the Lost Month by the New York Times, the U.S. was set far behind in testing for a virus that was spreading in exponential magnitudes. Of course. The problem, to save approving new coronavirus tests, the Food and Drug Administration dispensed with the standards review process and began granting emergency use authorizations, EUAs, but for weeks the only test authorized was one developed by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC. All others were barred from use. Then problems experienced with the first shipment of these tests kept from being used, instead requiring almost all labs to essentially send their swabs to the CDC lab in Atlanta. Only on February 26th, they were given the ability to test again. During this time, CDC maintained a stringent set of qualifications for who could be tested in the first place, causing the virus to quietly spread through American communities. And bureaucrats frequently lost the test forms of those they qualify, leading a frenzied panic behind the scenes. The crisis was simply unavoidable while left in federal control. Freedom for laboratory developed tests. By the last week of February, after a full month of mismanagement, the CDC's test remained the only one available in the entire country. On February 28th, a group of 100 virologists and lab clinicians sent a letter to a few congressional committees urging senators and congressmen to begin authorizing tests developed by clinical labs. The same day, the American Society of Microbiologists wrote to the FDA calling for the same. Clinical laboratories are now a rigorous process for validation and implementation of laboratory-developed tests. If this pathway was considered during an outbreak, it would allow for more rapid response to implementation of diagnostic testing. Many clinical laboratories have already validated a high-complexity laboratory-developed test for SARS-CoV-2 and could begin testing tomorrow, but cannot do so due to the FDA EUA process. Can we say God bless bureaucracy? Receiving this, FDA at last began taking its blunders seriously. On February 29th, it loosened its EUA policy, allowing all labs that were satisfied to perform high complexity testing under the Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendments, which is CLIA, to develop and use their own tests before receiving an EUA. All they were required to do was eternally validate their tests to notify the FDA of their intentions and submit an EUA request within 15 business days. Otherwise, they were free to test. My, oh my. I got a chuckle here now and then, folks. A step in the right direction, towing the line between appearing too restrictive and too permissive. The FDA chose to defer the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, the agency in charge of CLIA certification. Most labs have to be certified under CLIA. However, a legal exemption allows labs to operate without certification if the CMS has determined their state licensure law to be equipped to or more strict than CLIA requirements. Many well-equipped labs choose exemption to the onerous benign recertification process and the CMS user fees they would otherwise have to pay. Unfortunately, the FDA only liberalized its policy for those who were certified, meaning that CLIA exempt labs still had to wait through the EUA process under the guidelines, though many may have been much better equipped for testing. Worse still, it just so happens that the only two states offering CLIA exemptions are those where tests at the time were needed most: Washington, the location of the first U.S. outbreak, and New York, and the epicenter of the crisis in America. Furthermore, most private companies were left out of the mix. Most of them do not count as labs and are outside the CLIA certification process, leaving them unable to test without EUAs. The North Carolina-based LabCorp was a key exception, making its test available for order 11 days before the EUA was issued. But aside from this, the market remained completely choked off. Yet, with these roadblocks, the updated EUA policy was decidedly less burdensome to test production and thus work as intended, helping to gradually reduce test shortages. FDA Commissioner Dr. Stephen Hanna confirmed that by mid-March, more than 40 laboratories have notified us that they are intend to begin testing soon under our new policy for laboratory-developed tests. For this emergency, deregulation worked to the extent that it existed. Decentralization in New York on February 29th, the FDA finally authorized the use of a second test manufactured by the Wadsworth Center, a re-owned public health lab in New York. But everyone's hands still remain tied. Only the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene and the Wadsworth lab itself were allowed to use the test. As a result, the CDC remained only health body capable of sending tests nationwide. Mike Pence announced on March 1st that a new batch of 15,000 CDC kits had just been distributed, but the actual number was a lot smaller, about 100, which was nowhere near enough. Widespread testing remained elusive. Then on March 10th, after pleas from the New York Department of Public Health, the FDA amended the Wadsworth EUA, giving test health officials the power to approve other labs for use of the test. And then from then on, any CLIA certified lab from across the country could use the Wadsworth test, just with New York's say-so. An unprecedented localization of regulatory authority, but it didn't end there. Private manufacturers saved the day. On March 12th, a third EUA was granted, this time to a test by Roche Molecular Systems, which could be used by all CLIA certified labs countrywide. This was a step forward from the Wadsworth episode. No one had to be bestowed special authority by anybody any longer. The very next day, Roche began preparing 400,000 tests for shipments to labs across the country, the first shipments of many. After that, the FDA began granting additional EUAs on a near daily basis, authorizing an additional 19 tests by the end of March, each also available for use by all qualified CLIA certified labs. Diagnostic manufacturer Thermo Fisher began distributing 1.5 million of its tests on March 15th, with many of its counterparts following soon after. Private production was majorly ramping up. A wide variety of tests began popping up with the help of the private sector. Some are point of care tests which can be performed anywhere, helping to save hospital beds. Others can only be conducted in labs containing special machinery which process large quantities of swabs at a much quicker pace. Turnaround time has been another area of frequent innovation. Abbott Laboratories released a test at the end of March that can give results in as little as 5 minutes. Even as easy as home tests were becoming available before the FDA cut their production short. Rolling back federal overreach helped expand not only the overall number of tests, but also the number of different types that could be accessed. On March 16th, the FDA announced yet another policy change. It finally allowed private manufacturers to distribute their tests before receiving EUA and without CLIA certificates. The regulatory structure was thoroughly decentralized, permitting each state to directly authorize tests, develop within its borders a illicit sidestep of the FDA's authority. The problem remained autarky. States can only authorize the tests of private developers in their own states, making EUA still necessary for these tests to be used nationwide. Even still, on March 31st, the U.S. passed the 1 million mark for the number of tests performed, a significant milestone, though achieved later than the officials had hoped. Moving into April, the country was testing at much more suitable levels than it had been, more than 100,000 each day. But after all this, some patients were still being refused tests. The FDA's policy changes neither came soon enough, nor went far enough. Solutions for the future? Imagine how much more success the U.S. would have in combating the virus if private tests have been made available earlier. Roche, to name just one example, claims to have developed its test by January 30th, but wasn't approved until March 12th, thanks to the convoluted EUA process. Diagnosing more cases at the beginning of the crisis would save thousands of American lives later on. But this isn't uncharacteristic of the FDA. Its snail-paced approval process regularly restricts many Americans from accessing life-saving medicines, killing tens of thousands of sick patients each year. Even while granting EUAs as emergency fast track, the agency fell fatally short. It was forced to delegitimize its own authority just to save face, but serious solutions must go deeper. The regulatory system must be turned on its head. First, the FDA's emergency decentralization policies must be made permanent and standard-bearing. Then the March 16 guidelines have to be taken further to the logical extreme. The FDA must be smashed to pieces and replaced by a patchwork of 56 little FDAs. The health departments of all 50 states, the 5 major U.S. territories, and Washington, D.C. already have the infrastructure to place to regulate independently. It could become reality overnight with a single pen stroke. And you can use that as a executive order. Something to think about, folks. Of course, this would be a mere stepping stone on the road to further privatization and freedom of choice. The government's rubber stamp restrictionism will have to be completely dismantled state by state. People must be free to use and ingest whatever products they choose, leaving the food and drug regulators an advisory role, but not force of law. Coercion would be nowhere to be seen. Then the private certification market, which already grades food as organic and kosher, could quickly begin certifying drugs and diagnostics as safe and effective, leaving the remaining vestiges, vestiges of the regulatory state to evaporate. Had this free choice advisory been in place during the current coronavirus pandemic, a wider array of tests would have been made available much sooner. There would have been a lot less panic, confusion, mismanagement, infection, and death if individuals and firms had been allowed the basic liberty of making decisions for themselves. I can't knock that at all, my friends, and this is true. Those are the facts. When you have a game of government knows best, it turns to crap. Plain and simple. And it has happened multiple times. When you got these individuals trying to tell us how to think, how to live, and how to wipe our rear end, they can't even tie their own shoelaces. This is what's happening in here. And this is why I always believe in natural remedies to fight these ordeals, even though it's man-made or not. It's just giving you an example. Because I seen this one video a while back, which by a libertarian site. And they had orders to do their self-testing, and the person was found negative. It took about 10 minutes. It was very cool. So I could thank Adam Kokesh for that. He shared that on his Twitter page, and even him, he was declared negative as well. And it's cool about that product. It tells you if you're positive, if you've been recovered, or if you're negative. 10 minutes. What's so hard about that? Why wait for the CDC to call the shots? You can just do it instantaneously. Boom. And you can have it, sir. If you can have it by your doctor, do it in front of your doctor. That's fine too. You can have them notarize it. Not that hard at all, folks. You don't need to go through these chipping and all that crap which Bill Gates wants us to use. With such an Orwellian scumbag that he is. Yeah, I tell him, a scumbag. If all you Bill Gates supporters don't like it, I don't care. And even Fauci, another career bureaucrat. These guys are like Huey and Dewey, all right? But I do support decentralization and privatization, even when it comes to medicines, checkups, and all that. Not by the state, because hey, like I said before, if you recall what happened with the 1973 HMO Act and the Affordable Care Act. See, the whole healthcare crisis could be resolved by not creating a new referendum. It became law, but repealing the HMO Act in its entirety. It would be a lot better. It would be perfect? No, but it would be a hell of a lot better. And that's why we got to learn more about self-reliance and be volunteerist. That's how I see it. And that is it. I thank everyone for listening. Plus, feel free to download and share us throughout your social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, or you said something that's interesting you want to check out, whatever you do, please share this correspondence with decorum. Plus, I will leave the footnotes on my Spreaker page if you want to do a little donation. PayPal.me/LokiLuck and it's the number 3 altogether. Alright, once again, thank you for your time, but always remember that demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep on spreading love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.